Hello and welcome. This is your host today, Francisco Hansen from VOQUZ Labs, and I have with me Eduardo Duran, a member of our team responsible for sales in the US area. Hello, Eduardo. How are you?
Hi, nice to meet you. Very excited about talking about this very relevant topic with you today, Francisco. Thank you.
Thank you. We set up this webinar because we have seen lots of things happening on the SAP market with Rise with SAP during the last months, especially in Q4. SAP was approaching many people to try and close some new deals with its cloud offering there. So the question is, what is Rise with SAP? Are the benefits increasing? The costs? What is it really? What does it contain? And what does the future licensing model look like? Would it be worth to switch over from the classical ECC solution to this one? What have you seen on the market, Eduardo? Do you see many clients with looking at Rise? What do you think about that from a sales perspective?
This is a very appealing idea. You know, trying to think about having this complete suite in the cloud without the hassle of having to maintain the systems and doing the basic work is very appealing. The question here is, does it make sense for my company? And what I'm seeing with a lot of our customers is that uncertainty about whether they should make the move or not. And that's what we're going to try to address here today. We're going to try to figure out, first understand what Rise is. And then afterwards, what we're going to try to do is we're trying to figure out whether that's for me and my company, or if I should stick to a different model with my SAP deployment. So in order to do that, I'm sorry.
Yeah, not a problem. I was just going to say sorry. With COVID, I have my child at home, so I had a brief interruption. Go on, Eduardo.
So in order to address this question and trying to figure out whether this is suitable for my company and whether I should make the move on going with Rise, what we're going to try to do is follow this agenda here on your screens. We're first going to talk a little bit about our company, who we are. You know, many of you already know VOQUZ Labs. You know that we are experts on the SAP area. But we're also going to talk about Rise. What exactly is Rise? What's the licensing model? What are the license definitions? And how do you calculate those costs? And all of this is in context of, does it make sense for me and my company? But then lastly, we're going to talk about our SAMQ tool and how we do a simulation of Rise with a quick assessment process in order to figure out whether that's suitable for you and your company as well. So this is very relevant. I think that you know, towards the end of our presentation, our webinar, you're going to have a clear understanding of what are the next steps in order to make this move or not.
Okay, let's go on. Just 2 minutes to tell you a bit about the company. Most of you already know who we are. As we sometimes already told, we were founded in the 80s, but then in 2012 we had a spin-off from our company, VOQUZ Labs, VOQUZ IT Solutions, which was called then VOQUZ Labs. And this is a company which is specialized in SAP licensing, measuring usage of SAP, preparing you to cope with audits, with negotiations with SAP, just getting the highest return on investment possible out of your SAP installation. We have today offices in Amsterdam, Berlin, Cape Town, Cluj, Hong Kong, etc., etc. Most of our business being done in Europe and the US. And but we have basically almost all over the world today offices or partners that we work with. Go on. You take care of this one.
So we're going to talk a lot about the 3 main pillars that sustain our company. And so we have 3 areas of expertise. The first one is the software asset management tool called SAMQ. With this, we do license management for your SAP deployment. Then we also do SAP authorization management with user provisioning, compliance, authorization, and roles through the SetQ tool. And encompassing all of this, we have the advisory group that is led by you, Francisco, in our organization, with a group of experts that can actually come in and do real business strategies with a real impact on your deployment on SAP and of course the cost of it, with things like contract review. We help you with negotiations on SAP. We do audit preparation for
Eduardo, I'm getting the feeling you want to sell something. We are not selling today. Come on. Let's go quickly through this. We want to talk about RISE with SAP. Our people are really in a hurry to listen about this another day. About this, we have a lot of clients in any business area, very big clients, some small clients, many projects a year. This is what helps us supporting you in these things. Let's go over it. Let's go start with RISE directly. So the question is, first of all, what is it? What is RISE with SAP? Now, most of you know the old products from SAP, basically the ECC or ERP Center Core. That is basically the traditional on-premise perpetual license system of SAP that still many clients are using. And now when you have such an installation, you mostly have the software, you have infrastructure that you're operating yourself on an own data center, or you are already contracting someone else. You have externalized or outsourced these services, either with smaller companies or with one of the three big hyperscalers, so Google, Microsoft, Azure, Amazon AWS. You need to manage this operating systems and hardware. You have some software support for upgrading your operating systems, your things like that, taking care of the hardware, etc. And on top of that, you have your software contracts with SAP. You perceive some advisory and implementation services from systems integrators on the market, and you have maybe an own application management or are even contracting this. So many different things to operate an SAP system, maybe many contracts, maybe not so many. And this is the first idea that SAP comes up with here, and saying, well, we want to offer you less contracts, so we want to have an offering that includes both the software as the infrastructure and the services necessary to operate this. And then you have advisory and implementation services and application management services. Strange in this graph at first look. It appears as though software and support, technical management infrastructure is now smaller than it was before. Well, in my opinion, it isn't. It is exactly the same, just different. We'll see into that. Go on. On the next slide, how is SAP selling RISE? What are they telling? This is not another upgrade. This is a new way of working. God, this sounds like a beautiful movie that is about to start, isn't it? And we see a full circle with three different things here: one offer, one contract, one responsible company. So yeah, one contract, one responsible company doesn't sound bad. In fact, not a bad idea. And then we have at the top SAP S/4HANA Cloud. And this is SAP S/4HANA Cloud. So this is not new. This is what we already had. Now we can, instead of HEC, so HANA Enterprise Cloud, we can contract with RISE with SAP together, the cloud with the infrastructure on a provider of choice between the three big hyperscalers. Then you are getting some.
That the main difference here is that you as a company actually have the choice of going with your cloud provider of your election. Is that the case?
Well, you can go with either AWS, Google, or Azure, one of those three. These are your options. So if you are happy with one of those three, then yes, you can within the contract tell SAP you would rather go with Google or you would rather go with Azure. You have a lot of services already with Azure and want to stick with that, and you're glad with their added values, so you can make a choice there. Something again I don't like. sales buzzwords. This is a new way of working. We are seeing here business process intelligence, custom code analyzer, SAP readiness check, business networks, Starter Pack, business technology platform, lots of things. Seems like a big thing. Go on to the next slide. So my view on this, what is the catch? This is SAP S/4HANA Cloud. RISE with SAP is SAP S/4HANA Cloud with infrastructure on top of that, which was included anyway, but now we have the hyperscalers driving it with under predetermined service levels. So all the other things, some starter packs, some tools, some services, nice to have a first insight into those things, but this is not the value. We're talking about maybe a value that is equivalent to 5% of the whole offering at most. And some of these reports are things that you will execute once at the beginning. S/4HANA readiness check is something you do once. Ariba fine tool, many clients of us working with it, but 2,000 documents is just a little aroma of what Ariba is. This is just the start. Same thing for logistics business networks, asset intelligence with 200 equipments. This is not covering anything. This is just the opportunity to look into those things and see if this is something. So my first opinion here is a new way of working? No. This is SAP S/4HANA Cloud. You have infrastructure, you have the provider of your choice between the big three providers, fine. I get that, that's a good idea. The decision drivers is this. This is the top box, the blue box, the green boxes are something, some things that are nice to have, but definitely not what will be driving your decision here. So let's move on. What more have we found here? This is how SAP shows you what they have on the cloud today, and on the dark gray area in the middle, you can see what is included when you buy RISE with SAP full user equivalents, so user licenses with no additional engines or line of business solutions, etc. So on the dark gray, this is what is included in RISE with SAP. You want to have more, then you have line of business solutions and you have suites. And those can complement what you need if you're a bigger company, or if you want to look into procurement automation like Ariba, travel management like Concur, asset management, sourcing and procurement, etc. There are many different solutions here that you can add to that, but this stays as it was. These are additional engines or additional line of business solutions. What I can see here, though, is that during the last 5 years, SAP has been really completing their offering by a lot. In the beginning, 5 years ago, on the cloud side, we had few products. Now we can see a whole bunch of products that are on the cloud today. This is interesting. This makes it more realistic to some time if you want, and if it makes sense for your company, go in that direction. So not a bad idea here. What do you think about that, Eduardo? Is this, are clients looking really into this functionality when deciding about RISE with SAP, or is this just a spontaneous and money-driven decision?
I think it's a little bit of both. I think that in the evaluation on whether we should go with this route, everything needs to be considered, right? There's the cost, but you also need to understand the cost of ownership long term, and I think we're going to talk about that a little bit. But we need to make sure that we maintain at least the functionality that we require and that we've been accustomed to, and then also that it makes sense financially for our company, right?
Yeah. And as always, I mean, after working 30 years in the consulting and software business, you know how quick you can put together a PowerPoint slide. So this is not the question. You need to really look thoroughly into what's behind everything here, because we have some products that are new. That's a fact. I was just thinking about the SAP Data Warehouse Cloud and a client of ours driving a test of it and seeing that, well, for his particular needs, it was not a product that was mature enough for now. For others, it may be different, but you really need to look into the details. And as of today, we don't have the same functionality on S/4HANA Cloud or RISE with SAP as we do on the on-premise version. That's a fact. You need to be aware of that. And you need to have a thorough look into, is this something that is really feasible for me? Now, what I'm seeing with many clients today is that this is a money-driven decision, that they say, well, I want to get rid of my shelfware. I'm going to RISE with SAP, not thinking about migration costs, not thinking about losing functionality, not thinking about long-term financial implications. So first advice is really take the time. This is not a decision you should make between the 15th and the 31st of December. This is something you need to really think through and decide on whether this is the way to go for you. It may be a good situation, a good offering, but you need to find out. So
the other thing, Francisco, is
please.
Sorry, the question is, if you do go this route and migrate, can you really get rid of all your costs for keeping up your servers, or are you able to actually get rid of it, or can you still be paying some costs for continue to operate those servers that you had? So I think that we know that every SAP deployment with every company is different, and it's a living environment. But like you said, I just want to stress upon everybody that it's not a light decision to make, and a really good analysis needs to be made in order to get the best outcome possible, right?
Yep. I was just looking at a question here. I'm confused. What is the difference between ST and having RISE 2? But what do you mean with ST? Sorry, I don't get what ST is and MT. Please clarify this, and then we'll go to your question. Go on to the next slide, please. So what more? Complexity. What are we talking about here? Oh, single tenant. Yeah. Okay. So this is I'll get to that. So what is the difference? Basically, they call it single tenant. They call it private cloud, public cloud, private cloud, single tenant, etc. So if you look at the core of the offering, what is included with RISE with SAP is exactly SAP S/4HANA Cloud private edition single tenant. This is the standard. You can also contract the public edition, but basically the core of RISE with SAP is exactly the same product that they had before. Now they are bringing some additional things on top of that, and they have changed some of the user definitions, but we are not talking, definitely not talking of a different product. This is S/4HANA Cloud, private edition, single tenant, or public edition. Then you have a lower price and don't have your own servers. Don't expect this to be something absolutely different. Some, as said, little differences on the user definitions. We'll get to that. So complexity, how far is SAP? They have 18 cloud. Sorry, this was a typo of me. Product groups. These are the ones that you can see on the left table. You can see the 30 metrics that they are using today for the line of business solutions. So you can see things like revenues, cost of goods sold, so things that we know already from the on-premise solutions. The full user equivalence, we'll talk about that, but also still technical metrics that are sometimes quite annoying, like gigabytes of memory or storage. Unavoidable though, if you have infrastructure included, of course. Connections, the famous barrels of oil, assets under management, etc., etc. In total, 378 single products with the tiers, and so you see around, I think it was 1,700 line items on the price list, but it's really 378 different SKUs. So go on, please, Eduardo. What
so
more?
we have another question from Scott Brickley, and the question is: will SAP negotiate variances to the license metrics for S/4HANA in the same manner that they did for ECC, or have they become more rigid in this regard?
In my opinion, nothing has changed. And depending on the size of your company, it is clear that you sometimes can't live with the standard metrics. And we are still with many clients redefining metrics. As always, also here, don't count on redefining metrics in 6 weeks. You gotta take 3 months to 6 months to be prepared and have the time of the whole sales infrastructure or staff structure at SAP to sign off for such changes, things like that. But yeah, there is still a chance to negotiate many things. If you have a small installation, probably little chances. If you have a big revenue with SAP, you definitely can do something about it. So next slide, please. What do we have here? The licensing model. What has changed? I think one of the biggest changes that we have here is the change from standard user licenses. We had around 20 different user license types in ECC. Now we have the full usage equivalence, and we'll explain about that. Digital access is a bit less pricey on the S/4HANA Cloud solution. Not a big difference though. And as we talked about business solutions before, now it is called line of business solutions or industry solutions. Basically, it's the same principle. You have engines. A change here, though, is they have mostly the strategies to not have users as a metric anymore. The users would be the full usage equivalents. And in the line of business solutions, you shouldn't be paying for users anymore. There are some exceptions though, but this is the general strategy. Go on, next slide. Don't want to spend too much time on that. So full user equivalence, how does this work? Very simple. Yesterday you had ECC and you had 1,000 professional users, 500 limited professionals, you had workers, logistics, etc. Now you buy one single user license type, the FUE or full user equivalent. And it is up to you to assign this type of general purpose license with this conversion rates that you see here at the bottom to the 4 particular license types. So let's say you buy 100 full user equivalents, then you would have 50 developers. You would have 500 core users, or you can transform them in 3,000 ESS, so employee self-service users. And these are, by the way, the 3 license or 4 license types that you find on RISE with SAP, which are identical with the S/4HANA Cloud Cloud Edition. What was the name? I always forget that. S/4HANA Cloud Private Edition, single tenant. This was exactly the users that you have there. So go on.
Yeah. Would this relate like having an exchange rate and you just have one single coin, if you will, like we'll be using euros or dollars, and then you can exchange for whatever that is. But how often can you change this configuration, or does it make sense to evaluate how we're using it? Because as we know, based on experience, sometimes as a client, we think that we're going to use certain type of users, and then down the road, the reality turns out to be a little different. So how do you adjust it? Can you give us a little bit of context on how this actually and practically works?
Yeah, so the difference between before and now is before you had to negotiate with SAP and tell them, well, I have in fact 3,000 ESS users that are classified today. I bought expensive project licenses for them. I don't need them. Could you please exchange? And if you bought something from SAP and they were in a good mood and they needed the business, then they would exchange something. Now you are free to do those exchanges over the year, but that doesn't, of course, prevent you from running out of licenses. You basically still have to measure what are you really actually using. So do you need ESS users? Do you need core advanced users? The advanced user is the old professional user. So you have more flexibility. You don't have to ask favors from SAP on how you assign licenses, but you still have to measure how you are using your licenses so that once a year, when SAP comes with a measurement, you can prove that you're correctly licensed. And with those exchange rates, I mean, let's say you have 100 licenses or 1,000 licenses, to make this simple. If you are using 1,000 professional or so-called advanced users, that's it. Then after, with the first 1,000 first user, you run out of licenses. But you could instead of that have 30,000 ESS users. So you need to really understand what you need, and this is why we still are selling our tools, still have people doing a quarterly analysis of usage, of transaction analysis to see what people are using, which application components, etc. This doesn't prevent you from having to measure things, but it prevents you from having to ask favors from SAP. So very good question, Eduardo, thank you. Go on. So here you have an example. I want to jump on about this because we are running a bit out of time. This is just to show you that having the same amount of licenses, you can assign them differently. But let's go to the license definitions. What has changed here? Now go on, next slide. So as said, we are still measuring licenses, and what does it say? So developers, easy to measure. Basically, you look at your development systems. Developers are only on development systems, not quality, not production, etc. Advanced users are professionals. So this is the top, apart from the developer, the top license type. User, not an IT guy, but a user. This is the most expensive license type, and that means this guy, the advanced user, has access to everything within SAP. So we don't need to do big examination here. The question is, anyone who doesn't have enough with the ESS or the core user needs an advanced user. So the question is, to whom could we assign the core or the ESS user license? And this is not the classical ESS. This is not the old core as we know it from S4HANA, or what's called functionality user with S4HANA. It is a bit different, and we'll see on the next slide the proper definition of it. We have SAMQ templates in our tool today, so that you can basically run the tool on ECC, analyze components and application components and transactions that people do, and thus simulate what user license types you will need on RISE with SAP. And this is a standard project that we do today. Before moving over, check how many users or FUEs you need. Here,
so the challenge continues to be, the actual understanding of exactly what my employees are doing and what type of licensing they need, correct?
Absolutely. I mean, with the price going from euros to 3,500 euros, I mean, it's more than tenfold the price from the cheapest to the most expensive user. So you definitely need to do something. And don't want to talk around it, but it's a fact that on S4HANA, as well as here too, we have an issue with the cheapest license type, priced at some 300, I think. The issue here is basically, what do we do with that? If you had core ESS core users in the past, I think they were worth around $60 minus discount. We had a very, very cheap license type that could cover, I don't know, people who wanted to look into the payroll or enter some time and attendance data, things like that. You don't have that cheap of a license type today, maybe. So eventually you need to negotiate there a bit with your discounts and correct this. But in general terms, we are finding out then that when we do the proper simulations of usage, the total configuration that we get out in S4HANA Cloud or S4HANA or even RISE with SAP tends to be less expensive than what most clients had before. Now, of course, clients who had a very, very proper license assignment using workers, logistics users, ESS users, ESS core users, the whole palette of different licenses that SAP had, they may not turn to be less expensive when we move over to S4HANA Cloud or RISE with SAP.
Understand. Thank you.
Yeah, go on. Next slide. So let's get into a bit more into the details here. First of all, the question, next slide, please. This went away for some reason. The question is it the same as with S4HANA? No, it is similar. It is not the same. So the self-service use definitely has less functionality than the S4HANA productivity use. Same with a core user, it does have less functionality than the S4HANA functionality use. So we still have gray areas. This is difficult for us as a software asset management company, analyzing activity of users and trying to assign the proper license types is so difficult sometimes when SAP just doesn't provide accurate definitions about what people are entitled to do and what not. Best example here, approvals of invoices, something that is requested by every client for many years now. I don't want to spend an expensive license type for people who approve invoices because I have so many middle management positions who do that. Still not clear what you need there, etc. And so on the other hand, of course, proper license assignment should reflect the use rights of SAP and your contract. And when SAP is the one who's not defining use rights properly, I wouldn't worry so much about that. So there is room for interpretation. Use this wiggle room that you have there to your advantage. As a lawyer would tell you the same here. What is not defined is more or less free, and it is a question of being sensible on how you do things, but defend your position. Don't just act on with the attitude like, if I don't know, I'd rather take the most expensive license type, because you could multiply your costs just by doing so. Okay, go on. What more? I think we are getting now into the real life examples, and this is where it gets interesting. We have an example here. What can we see first of all? There are some discount tiers with the full user equivalents of RISE with SAP. First thing you must know is the minimum quantity that you must purchase with SAP is 40 full user equivalents. That is 40 professional users, so to say. I mean, with the kind of clients we are talking here with, this shouldn't be an issue. But depending on the quantity of users or full user equivalents you have, the standard pricing goes down. So it happens with the HANA database, with many other products. This is the standard discount tiers. This is not the client discount. This is not the final discount. Please understand that. Go on to the next slide. So if we take this example with a client that is paying 150 per full user equivalent, it gets a bit more complicated. So bear with me, be a bit patient. What have we done here? We are comparing pears with apples, and it still makes sense. It makes sense to help you understand what you're doing when you buy RISE with SAP. And give me a bit of patience to go through this. We have a top table which is showing S4HANA on-premise, so just software costs. And we have a bottom table or middle table that shows RISE with SAP. This is the apples. Here we have basically software plus infrastructure included in the costs. Why have we done that? So we are looking about an installation. This is a production client. So the combination of users that he has on S/4HANA, the productivity user, on RISE, the self-service user is quite high. They have 900 of them. So many people in the production facilities, maintenance facilities, doing the kind of activities that a self-service or productivity user can cope with. And so there is some weight towards the productivity or self-service use. So in the top table, this client has an initial invest. He needs to purchase the perpetual licenses and is spending 1.8 million euros in this case. And then every year for 10 years, he pays maintenance. The bottom table shows you an opposite the situation with RISE with SAP. So you have no initial investment. You pay your subscription or rental every year, 822,600 euros in this configuration. Just an example, just list prices, not relevant, the numbers. The comparison of the numbers is what's relevant. So if we look at the bottom table, cash out and net present value, and you see year over year the accumulated spending. You can see with S/4HANA Perpetual, you start with the purchase of the licenses and the maintenance of the year one. So you start already with spending 2.28 million. 2.28 millions, yes. And RISE with SAP, you start with a lower amount because it's a rental. And you can see on the top graph, on the diagram, that basically it's first after 4.5 years that it starts paying off to have the S/4HANA installation instead of RISE with SAP. But this doesn't consider infrastructure costs, so that's not really a fair comparison. What is important here? If you look at the bottom table and at the most rightmost side of this page, you can see that the cash out, if we take the 5.9 million, so roughly 6 million that you spent for licenses with S/4HANA Perpetual, here we are spending 137%. So basically 37% more for having infrastructure and a bit less functionality than you have with S/4HANA, but this is almost unfair to say. Now, an accounting guy would come to me and would say, well, but I have the money that I didn't invest and spend for buying licenses. I put it on the bank and got some taxes. This is why we did the net present value analysis here. And this tells us on this circle that you're basically spending in reality 19% because you could have invested the money that you didn't spend in licenses, etc., etc. So it is something with a net present value consideration, it's a difference of 19%. And this difference is telling you this is what you're paying for infrastructure. So far, so good. Is 20% of the software price good for infrastructure or not? I leave it up to you. Let's go to the next slide. And we were talking about a production customer here. Now we have a finance customer. And remember that we are only considering the costs of users here, not the whole engines and all the other complications. This is a simplification of the whole problem. So now here, we have a situation where we have less self-service users, less S/4HANA productivity users, also 1,500 users in total, but with a different configuration. And suddenly, the difference between S/4HANA and RISE with SAP goes up to 49% in cash out or 30% in net present value. And this is something to consider thoroughly. So is 50% of your software costs still viable and acceptable for your infrastructure? Remember, this is not the whole infrastructure. This is only the part of the user licenses that you're paying for infrastructure. So this is an issue.
I think it's very worth understanding that, because these two different examples span so differently, if you will, by the type of users and configuration they have on their licenses, it goes back to me doing my own exercise in my company. So it makes all the sense to try to do an exercise like this and look at my license configuration in order to be able whether that makes sense or not, correct?
Exactly. So, and the top table where you have S/4HANA on premise, this is the half of the truth. This is the part where you need to add your IBM, Syntax, Google, Azure, whoever is driving your infrastructure or even your internal costs, add those infrastructure costs to the software costs and see if you are cheaper or not, if you have the same quality or not than that SAP is offering here. Compare your real cost structure with an perpetual license, which is the one that you have on the top. Remember, perpetual license, you could cancel your maintenance if you decide in 5 or 10 years to move over away from SAP to Oracle to whoever, Microsoft. You have more flexibility in opposite to the subscription where you will be paying a rent forever unless you really leave the tool. So something to really look deep into, nothing so simple, but definitely necessary to look into. So move on, next slide. What else are we seeing here? So the decision framework, gonna look upon the clock, we have around 15. So when you are on ECC today, you probably have on the table the idea of could I, must I move over to S/4HANA? Is RISE with SAP a viable alternative? So you could go from ECC to S/4HANA perpetual on your own data center. You could also go to S/4HANA perpetual, close a new contract, cancel ECC, do a contract conversion, product conversion, and then move over to S/4HANA perpetual, but on a hyperscaler. So in that case, you do your own contract with Azure. You do your own contract with AWS, with having direct access on the service levels that you want, on the size of the servers that you want, on the additional benefits and specifics of this hyperscaler. In the case of Azure, let's say business intelligence with their Power BI or artificial intelligence solution. In the case of Amazon, with the flexibility that they are offering today in many different areas. So everyone has particular benefits that you could make use of if you go directly on a contract with your hyperscaler. Then of course you have to manage different providers. Also smaller local providers like Syntax, I don't know, there are thousands of them who have interesting offerings on the market, and many clients just don't want to go away from them. And the third option is you go with RISE with SAP, with a subscription model, and you have more dependency on SAP, but you have a simple contract, easier to manage. You have the hyperscalers, et cetera, et cetera. Now, one of the big drivers that I see today is the shelfware. And although this is understandable and interesting, just speaking with a client who has a total 3.7 million of yearly costs with SAP, and they have 1 million of shelfware. So, I mean, you're paying basically 220,000, 22% every year for software that you don't use. And this is why shelfware is sometimes a driver. SAP convinces you in saying, well, I will replace this maintenance for RISE with SAP rentals or subscriptions. You can get rid of this, then you withhold some licenses that still don't exist on RISE or something like that, etc. But you solve a part of the problem, and this is a driver. But this is only one side of the story, of course. You're looking at the ones with a one eye on the whole problem, and especially not looking at the long-term perspective on this, because you can also get rid of shelfware by doing a contract conversion, sticking with S/4HANA perpetual on-premise, and you also have the opportunity to get there. So don't accept that the only way to get rid of shelfware maintenance is going to RISE with SAP. Don't even want to take the idea in my mouth of canceling the whole maintenance, which is also a way of getting rid of shelfware maintenance, of course, but most of us are not in the position to make such a decision. Some are. Also an opportunity here. So next one, please.
Francisco, now that
Yeah.
we're talking about these scenarios and we're understanding that there's many things that we need to consider and take into account, so I would like to address a question from Jeremy. He says they need to pay the annual licensing support fee for 2022, but what happens if they want to migrate to RISE in Q1 2022? Will there be a refund? How will they get some discounts? I mean, just have, in your experience, how does it typically works with these types of negotiations with SAP when you're doing this type of migration?
Never ever pay double. Not acceptable with no exception at all. So first of all, normally, well, you make these decisions before. I assume if you're saying this, Jeremy, probably you were in the process of migrating already last year and you're ready to go live now, but somehow the contracts are not aligned. So the contracts must be aligned in a way that you don't pay double. And as a CIO, I will never accept something different from that. I have seen you can see anything on the market. I have seen people paying digital access and user licenses and sales orders all together, which is double and triple licensing. I have seen people paying maintenance and subscriptions in parallel. I have seen people, by the way, very usual during the transition phase, paying Oracle and HANA in parallel, which is something that really bugs me. I mean, this is selling you two things and you can only have one of them productive. So what the heck is this? But it does happen. So in my opinion, don't even think of paying double. And the idea how this works is they should translate or transfer or exchange the on-prem maintenance for the RISE with SAP subscription. This is how it works. This is if you have a good salesman with SAP who knows what he's doing, this is the way he will show you this to you, provide this to you, not paying double. Okay.
Thank you, Francisco. So Jeremy, if you have further questions, we're happy to work directly with you and help you with that process. Just lastly, talking about salespeople from SAP, we also have a question from Rajik. And the question is, we've been hearing that SAP will increase pricing for non-cloud licenses outside of RISE. Also, we have heard that SAP and hyperscaler sales teams are being incentivized to only sell RISE. What are your views and experience? Is SAP really promoting RISE or nothing?
Yeah, definitely. So SAP is pushing a lot for RISE. No question about that. Yes, hyperscalers a bit too. It's their business, although they don't care that much. In fact, as for HANA Perpetual on with an additional hyperscaler contract is probably more attractive for the hyperscaler than a RISE contract. They have a bigger margin. They have more business normally with that. It is more on SAP side. SAP is the one pushing. First of all, let SAP raise prices as they want. You don't need to pay them. Whatever you're paying today, the price increase is a question on whether you have it on your contract or not. Some people have not a price increase. Some people don't accept the price increase. Sometimes it's unfair too. If you have inflation, you must understand that prices go up. Sorry, let me drink something. Now, SAP is giving higher commissions to their sales reps selling cloud solutions than they are doing for on-prem. This is something that's happening. And the question is very simple. I mean, this is a retainer business. This is a recurring business. This is a rental. So you can go to the stock market, and we do the same with our company. We say, well, we managed. Yet last year we had like maintenance contracts and some new sales. This year we have recurring business, which has increased from what was perpetual last year. 22% of the revenue was coming there. Now we have, I don't know, 50, 60% of our business is recurring business. So this increases the value of our company. So they are totally crazy about selling you RISE with SAP, because this increases the value of SAP as a company. Totally makes sense. This is something that shouldn't be of your interest. And so having access to specialized knowledge, to price lists, to things like this, like that is essential for you to be able to manage this. And you can manage price increases with additional discounts. So who cares? Doesn't matter. So another thing, in the past we had software, now we have infrastructure. Now every infrastructure manager knows what the service description is and what an SLA is, or service level agreement. And I have been designing them for some years in the past in bigger outsourcing deals. And this document came across me, and I don't know if this is the only one that SAP is providing. I haven't seen another one, but this is called the Service Description Guide about SAP S4HANA, sorry, RISE with SAP S4HANA Cloud Private Edition. So basically RISE with SAP in the private version, service description. And what do they write here? Depending on how many full user equivalents you buy, you get driven to a different certain system size or t-shirt size, XS, small, middle, large, etc. So depending on how many user licenses you have, you get more or less computing resources, in this case, memory, RAM for your production, quality, and development tiers. And a certain number of application servers. So some clients get more development tiers, development servers if you're on the higher tier. Now, what's funny though is this definition of up to. Up to, what does it mean at all? Does it mean if SAP thinks it is nice and they do have a bigger margin, then they will give you more computing power, and if not, not? I mean, service level agreements are based on the minimum performance that the supplier must put on the table and not the maximal. This is, sorry to say that, this is a joke. This is not a service level. I hope there is another document that tells you, gives you better information. But if I see this as a service manager, I would just kick them out of my company. That's totally
it's like
unacceptable.
A catch, doesn't it? It's like a trap somehow. Yeah. Typically, you would say, that in order to support X amount of users, you would need a minimum of, processing power. And here's giving you the upper bracket rather than the lower one. So.
Another thing, I see some obscure salespeople going out and telling the client, well, you want to have more computing power, more RAM, you have to buy more users. And this is not the way this was originally thought. As you can see on SAP's price list on the right, you can see a product called S4HANA Cloud Memory Extension. So instead of buying more users, you can directly buy more memory. But still, I mean, the question here, before I decide that you want to buy more memory, the question is, are you getting a terabyte of memory, or maybe up to eventually a terabyte of memory? How do you know if you need to buy more memory? You need to know what you're getting. So other things that you need to look into here is not because you have a hyperscaler in the back, everything is included. Same is with your own data center. You have to consider disaster recovery, the frequency of backups that you need. Do you need long-term backups? Do you need more memory? Do you need additional test tenants? Do you need additional development servers, development tiers, quality tiers, etc.? All of this adds to the price, of course. So don't assume that the RISE with SAP standard price includes everything, because it does not. You need to go back to your infrastructure managers and compare what you have today with this offering. Do you need disaster recovery? Do you have a long-term backup? All of this adds to the costs also today. So don't make here again what I did before, apples with pears. If you're paying today disaster recovery, you need to include this price and ask SAP to offer you this on the proposal. So very quickly, we only have 2 minutes more or less. Let's go to the final slide. I think that's the next one exactly. So make a prepared decision about RISE. So things to check before signing. Do you want a software subscription model or a perpetual license? This is a policy, this is a strategy, this is something some companies say, I don't even care about rentals and subscriptions. I want to have software that is perpetual, that is mine, that I can cancel the maintenance if the supplier doesn't really behave the way they should, etc. Second, do you want to have a simple contract, or would you rather really be talking with your infrastructure managers? So the people who have your servers, do you want to know what the servers are, how big they are, influence on the service levels, on the sizing, on different things, adapt to that. Number three, 30 to 50% cash out on of the software costs for your infrastructure. Is this viable? Is this more than you pay today or less? This is up to you. I don't even want to value this. In occasions, it may be fine, in others not, but look at these costs. Are you getting rid of all what Eduardo said before? Well, no, this is the shelfware. Are you getting rid of all the shelfware? Don't accept a partial cancellation of shelfware. Request a full cancellation of software. Sorry, I need to shut down my phone. Also here. So, and request to get rid of all shelfware. Don't ever stay with a half solution where you're still paying maintenance for things you don't use. You need to get rid of this. So, are you being offered a good discount? Next thing, I see deals where clients have a 70% discount with SAP. They move over to RISE with SAP. Suddenly, they have 20%. Now, although SAP's margin is a bit lower with RISE with SAP because they have a subcontractor for the infrastructure, that doesn't mean the discount goes down to half or even less than that. Look at that. Look at your migration costs, by the way. This is an important part. What Eduardo said before was number 6. Can you get rid of your actual infrastructure costs, or does the RISE with SAP infrastructure just add to that? So if you're not getting rid of your infrastructure, but moving to this infrastructure plus software model, what is the value of that? And then the functional scope. Although we see RISE with SAP growing very quickly in functionality, you do need to look at that before you make the move, right? Does this cover your actual functionality, your industry solution that you have today? Or will you have to leave the half of your infrastructure on ECC or on-prem and only take the half to RISE with SAP and complicate your whole environment? So this is about it. So thank you very much. I think we are coming to an end. I'm 1 minute over time. Thank you very much for attending. And
thank you,
Eduardo said, contact us. Go on.
Yeah, thank you for educating us on RISE. Thank you everybody for your attendance. I know some of you need to leave, they had a hard stop, but it was well worth going through all of this. And feel free to drop us an email, contact us with any questions you may have. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone, for attending. Also from my side, look forward to talking with you. If you have more in-depth questions about your particular situation, feel free to ask us. We'll definitely tell you when the clock starts ticking for charging you something, but we are happy to answer single questions in the beginning, not an issue. Thank you very much. Wish you a successful week, rest of the week. Take care. Bye.
Thank you.